Porsche didn't quietly step away from one of the most storied names in automotive history. They unloaded their stake under genuine financial pressure in the middle of a transition already set in motion by forces far larger than any single content creator, and somewhere between the original boardroom negotiations and the final consortium arrangement that closed the deal, a YouTuber with a salvage title Bugatti Chiron sitting in his garage may have nudged the terms in ways that nobody fully anticipated. Not caused the sale, not brought down the brand, but nudged it. And the space between those two things is where the real story lives. Matt Armstrong builds wrecked cars. That's the whole premise of his YouTube channel, the platform that transformed garage repair work into a global viewing habit, and his series documenting the complete rebuild of a salvage Chiron pulled in millions of viewers who had never seriously examined what sites beneath the surface of a car priced at well over £1 million. What those viewers found, watching through Matt's camera across hours of detailed footage, wasn't what decades of brand mythology had trained them to expect. Interior trim panels sourced from Volkswagen Polos, electrical systems shared with Audi A3s, an airbag module that would be at home in a family hatchback tucked beneath carbon fiber bodywork and hand-stitched leather, costing more than most people take home in a year. A $5 fuse in a hypercar that charges $20,000 for a routine service visit. That list of components isn't a scandal in the engineering world, but it landed differently when a camera was holding each piece up to the light. None of that was technically a secret. Bugatti had never claimed to design every single component from scratch, and Volkswagen Group ownership has always carried the practical reality of parts sharing with mass-market vehicles. Every major player in the automotive industry operates some version of this arrangement. The shared platforms, the shared suppliers, the components hidden beneath premium finishing. It's how the economics of building expensive cars in manageable volumes actually work. What shifted when Matt published his footage wasn't the underlying fact. It was the visibility of it. The airbag held up to the camera. The fuse box documented in detail. Parts numbers cross-referenced with vehicles that sell for a fraction of the price. That footage, distributed across the internet to an audience measured in millions, collapsed the gap between what customers accepted in theory and what they could now watch unfolding on screen. The resulting shift in how people talked about Bugatti as a luxury brand is what some people started calling the Armstrong effect, and whether that effect carried any real financial weight became the question that divided automotive opinion down the middle. The argument against Matt mattering at all starts with one number, and that number is 93. In 2024, Porsche's operating profit fell by 93%. Not a difficult quarter, not a soft patch. A near-total collapse driven by the combined weight of restructuring costs, stalling electric vehicle demand across global markets, and consumer conditions that had stopped cooperating with the assumptions their projections depended on. Michael Steiner took over as chief executive carrying a mandate that required no interpretation. Cut non-essential assets. Rebuild the business around the products that actually generate the revenue Porsche runs on. Stop carrying prestige positions that read well in annual reports, but contribute nothing to the Cayenne or the Taycan or the 911. A 45% stake in a joint hypercar venture, however celebrated the brand attached to it, is not core Porsche business. It doesn't fund the electric vehicle transition Porsche is still navigating. It doesn't contribute to the recovery that a 93% profit collapse demands. Selling it was always going to come up in the restructuring conversation, and the numbers alone gave them more than sufficient reason to have that conversation without any outside factors entering the equation. Bugatti's actual customer base also presents a real obstacle for the Armstrong theory in its most aggressive form. The buyers of Chirons and Tourbillons are not making purchasing decisions after watching YouTube content late on a Tuesday. They're billionaires cycling through their third or fourth hypercar who approach acquisitions with legal teams, financial advisors, and due diligence processes that run well beyond anything circulating on social media. The specific group of buyers that Bugatti serves understood at some level that luxury manufacturers source components from parent companies. The idea that video documentation of that fact meaningfully redirected their purchasing decisions, or that Porsche's board assigned real weight to viral content when evaluating a transaction worth approximately $1.1 billion, asks you to pull the evidence considerably further than it wants to stretch. And then October 2025 shifts the shape of the argument entirely. Before Matt's Chiron series reached its widest audience, before the Audi airbag moment spread across automotive media, before the Armstrong effect had entered anyone's vocabulary, Mate Rimac was already in private negotiations to buy Porsche's 45% stake in Bugatti Rimac outright. The figure under discussion was approximately $1.1 billion, and Rimac's aim was uncomplicated: full ownership, no external shareholders, complete freedom to take Bugatti wherever he believed it needed to go. The sale was already in motion. Porsche needed to convert the asset into capital while their core operations recovered, and Rimac wanted the independence that having a financially distressed minority shareholder naturally complicates. That calculation existed entirely independent of anything happening on any content platform. The clean version of the story would end there, but the deal that actually closed wasn't the deal that October 2025 negotiations described. Rimac didn't end up as the sole owner. A consortium assembled around him, anchored by HOF Capital, a fund connected to the Egyptian-founded Sawiris family, alongside Blue 5 Capital, an investment group headquartered in Abu Dhabi. These outside partners joined Rimac in acquiring the stake from Porsche, with the completed transaction expected by late 2026. The original structure changed, and that gap between what was initially planned and what ultimately materialized is where every serious question about Matt Armstrong's actual influence finds somewhere to land. Three distinct explanations account for why the deal shifted from a solo acquisition to a consortium arrangement, and the honest position is that all three probably carried some weight. The first is the one Armstrong's audience gravitates toward. His documentation of parts bin components in ultra-luxury vehicles damaged Bugatti's perceived valuation at the exact moment Rimac needed to secure $1.1 billion in financing against that brand's name. Institutional lenders and private capital groups read the same coverage everyone else reads, and presenting a luxury hypercar brand, generating negative press about Volkswagen-sourced airbags as collateral for a billion-dollar transaction is a harder conversation than it would have been months earlier. Pulling in consortium partners may have been a practical adjustment to tighter financing conditions, and if that's what happened, the Armstrong effect left a real structural imprint on the deal, even without touching its underlying causes. The second explanation has nothing to do with YouTube and focuses entirely on how Porsche's financial position continued deteriorating as months passed. The more pressured the seller's situation became, the more urgency they brought to the negotiation, and a consortium of multiple capital sources can move faster and with less friction than a single buyer working through complex solo financing. The change in structure on this reading reflects pressure on the seller's side, not damage to the brand, and Porsche's timeline may have demanded a structure that only a group of investors could accommodate. The third gives Rimac full credit as a strategist. HOF Capital and Blue 5 Capital represent more than financing lines. They bring networks embedded in regions where appetite for luxury automotive and hypercar brands among high-net-worth buyers is significant and still expanding. Bringing those partners in from the Arab world and Abu Dhabi may have been a deliberate move from the start, positioning Bugatti in front of the buyers its future increasingly depends on. That thinking could have been running well before any external pressure made itself felt, and Rimac is too careful a businessman for the strategic logic of it to have gone unnoticed. Bugatti is not in decline. The brand enters this new chapter with Rimac at its operational center, with serious private capital behind it, and with more independence from large corporate ownership than it has carried in years. This is a transition, not a collapse, and transitions of this kind were always going to unfold on their own terms, regardless of what any individual creator published. What the Armstrong effect actually describes, once you strip it of the overstatements on both sides, is something that hadn't quite happened before in the automotive world or the broader luxury goods space. A creator operating through YouTube, filming inside a personal garage, shifted public perception of an ultra-luxury hypercar brand at the precise moment that brand was changing hands in a transaction worth over $1 billion. Not triggering the change, not controlling the outcome, but occupying the atmosphere around it, and possibly leaving an imprint on the final structure in ways the evidence can suggest but never fully confirm. For one person armed with a camera and a salvage title car, that remains a genuinely strange and consequential thing to have accomplished, even partially, and even entirely by accident.